It's not the heated arguments nor the dramatic showdowns. The thing that wounds a narcissist the most is when you choose silence. It's a paradox, really. They can thrive in endless debates, even feel a rush of excitement when you get angry, but they tremble in the face of quiet, unanswered space. And when that silence comes from a super empath, someone who once loved deeply, felt every vibration, and saw through every hidden crack, it's like a blade striking straight into their fragile ego. A narcissist survives on a special kind of fuel that psychology calls narcissistic supply. That can be admiration, anger, or even tears. As long as you react, they feel alive, they feel valuable. But when you stop texting, stop arguing, stop crying, they don't just lose a partner, they lose the mirror that reflected back the image they needed to believe they were real. And in that moment, silence becomes their worst nightmare. If you're a super empath, your silence cuts even deeper. Because you weren't just another reaction, they once believed you were the only light, proving they could be loved. You saw behind the mask and stayed. You loved them not for the fake glitter, but for the fragile parts the world ignored. Yet when someone like you goes silent, the narcissist knows the game is over. No more reflection, no more supply, no more light. They might pretend they're fine, even happier without you. They might flaunt a new relationship, post positive updates, or twist the story to make you look like the villain. But the harder they try to look strong, the more obvious it becomes. Your silence is eating away at them day by day, not because they lost love, but because they lost control. And this is the key point of today's video. We're going to explore why ignoring a narcissist is so devastating, why silence can throw them into panic more than any confrontation, and especially why, when that silence comes from a super empath, someone who once gave everything, it becomes a mortal wound, one that may never fully heal. Part 1. When silence becomes the most dangerous weapon. Silence may sound simple, but for a narcissist, it's nothing short of a nightmare, because they never truly care whether you love them or hate them. The only thing that makes them feel alive is your reaction. An angry text, a tear, even harsh words, all of it is proof that they still have control. That's why the moment you stop responding, the entire game they built so carefully collapses in an instant. For most people, love is an inner connection, an identity built on values, experiences, and personal beliefs. But for a narcissist, it's different. They don't have a stable sense of self. Their identity isn't something born from within. It's patched together from how others see them. They need you to reflect them back, like an empty mirror that only lights up when someone else's beam shines on it. That's why silence sends them into panic. When you withdraw every reaction, they lose the mirror that once reflected the image they wanted to believe in. And if you're a super empath, the effect is multiplied. Because you didn't just mirror the surface, you once saw the deep cracks inside them and still chose to stay. You were the one person who made them believe they could be loved. When silence comes from you, they don't just lose attention, they lose the only light that ever kept their darkness at bay. At that moment, an identity crisis begins. With no reflection and no validation, the narcissist is forced to confront the emptiness they've been running from their whole life. For them, it's like being thrown into a pitch-black room where every light suddenly goes out. No sound, nothing to hold on to, just absolute silence. And in that silence, they feel themselves disappearing. Of course, you won't easily see that collapse on the outside. A narcissist rarely lets anyone witness their true weakness. Instead, they put on new performances. They might flaunt a new relationship to prove you don't matter. They might post happy pictures, write positive updates, or act like they're living their best life, but it's only a thin mask. The harder they try to appear fine, the clearer it becomes that your silence is eating them alive. What makes silence such a dangerous weapon is that it breaks the cycle of manipulation they depend on. Normally, they drag you through emotional whirlwinds, from love to rage, from hope to despair, then back again with sweet promises. Each cycle strengthens their power, making you lose direction and depend on them. But when you go silent, that cycle snaps in half. Without your response, they can't adjust or manipulate. Their whole system of control suddenly becomes useless. And here's the fascinating part. In that quiet, the truth is exposed. With no one left to blame, no one left to reflect, the narcissist can't keep their illusion going. They're forced to face the very thing they fear most, that inside, there's nothing. And that truth is far scarier to them than any criticism you could ever say out loud. Silence also robs them of the ability to control the narrative. When you don't react, they can't paint you as weak, wrong, or too sensitive. Every smear attempt loses power if you don't play along. And in a world where image is everything, losing control of the story means losing one of their most important tools for holding power. But silence isn't about revenge. It's an act of reclaiming yourself. It's how you pull back the energy you once gave away without realizing it. It's how you stop living in the script they wrote for you. It doesn't need a grand speech or a dramatic confrontation. By being silent, you're declaring that you're no longer a side character in their play, and that calm silence carries more force than any words ever could. For a super empath, the choice to go silent carries an even deeper meaning, because you're not just walking away, you're walking away after seeing it all. You stayed when no one else would. You loved them with a love far bigger than their selfishness. But when you finally choose silence, you're not only taking back your freedom, you're also destroying the one mirror that ever made them believe they were real, and that loss, to them, is beyond comparison. Part 2. The identity crisis of being ignored. When you go silent, a narcissist doesn't just lose someone to control, they lose the most important thing in their life, the mirror that tells them who they are. This isn't just a fleeting discomfort, it's a full-blown crisis, a shaking of the very foundation of the identity they thought was solid. In psychology, most people form their sense of self from within, through personal values, beliefs, and lived experiences. You know who you are because you have an inner foundation to rely on. But for a narcissist, it's different. They don't have that core. They're like a house built of mirrors, dazzling, reflective, impressive from the outside, but only standing as long as there's light from others. Take away the light and the whole house collapses. When you ignore them, that light disappears. In that instant, they have nothing to hold on to. They lose the ability to see themselves through your eyes. They lose the feeling of being important, of mattering, of still existing in your mind. For them, it feels like a death sentence for an ego that was already fractured long ago. What makes silence from a super empath especially devastating is that before, you didn't just reflect back the image they wanted. You saw the shadows they themselves denied, and you still stayed. You were living proof, rare proof, that they could be loved despite their flaws. And so when you vanish into silence, they don't just lose a source of reaction, they lose the only evidence that ever convinced them they might be redeemable. This crisis often shows itself in extreme behavior. Some narcissists jump straight into a new relationship, desperate to replace you with another mirror. But the truth is, they're not searching for love, they're searching for reflection. The new person is just a tool to fill the void you left behind. Others try to reinvent themselves by bragging about success, changing their image or pretending they've healed, but all of it is just a thin mask, because inside, the emptiness remains untouched. Interestingly, the crisis doesn't always explode loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly. You might see them go silent, vanish from social media, or suddenly withdraw from people. That's the sign of a hidden identity crisis, when they no longer know which role to play, no longer have anyone to reflect them, and no longer have a story to tell. Your silence has turned into an empty mirror, and they don't know how to face it. The irony is that in these very moments the truth leaks out, because when they can't manipulate you anymore, they also lose the ability to hide the truth from themselves. They're forced to confront the void they've been running from all their lives. the void of a borrowed identity, of a self that never truly formed. And that reality terrifies them more than anything. If you're a super empath, you can sense this shift easily. You feel the insecurity in their every move. You see the disorientation behind the hardened mask. And this is why your silence carries such weight, because it forces them to see what they never wanted to see. But here's the important part. This silence is not about revenge. It's not a weapon to hurt them. It's a step to protect yourself, because when you go silent, you no longer feed into the endless loop of manipulation and reaction. You stop playing the role in their game, and in that stopping, you take back control. For the narcissist, this loss is unbearable because you didn't just leave them, you left the illusionary world they fought so hard to maintain, and when that world collapses, they no longer know who they are. That is the identity crisis, a crisis with no escape, unless they finally dare to face the truth within. Part 3. The manipulation cycle broken. In any relationship with a narcissist, there's a familiar pattern that always repeats. Manipulation, reaction, reinforcement of power. It's a closed loop, a whirlpool that sweeps you in before you even realize it. They drop a vague comment, you scramble to interpret it. They deliver a hurtful action, you cry and demand an explanation. Then suddenly, they hand you a crumb of tenderness, making you believe everything could return to how it once was. And so the cycle spins on, transforming you from an independent person into someone constantly reacting to their rhythm. What fuels this cycle is not love, but power. To the narcissist, every tear, every plea, every argument you give them is proof they still hold control. They don't need your happiness, they just need your orbit, like a puppet dancing on their strings. And the irony is, in trying to fix things, you unknowingly tighten the strings that bind you. But when you go silent, everything changes. It's like the puppet suddenly drops its strings. The whole stage becomes meaningless. The narcissist no longer has data to read, emotions to exploit, signals to adjust their strategy. The cycle that once spun so smoothly comes to a screeching halt, leaving them shocked, like an addict cut off from their supply. Your silence, especially if you are a super empath, has the power to cut this cord cleanly, because empaths are often the ones who react the most, feel the deepest, and hurt the hardest. Your sensitivity and compassion made you the easiest to trap in their cycle. You cried more, forgave more, and stayed longer than anyone else, and yet, you're also the one with the greatest power to destroy that system entirely with a single choice: silence. And for the narcissist, your silence is not just an empty space, it is the collapse of their entire mechanism of power. Imagine a chessboard where they were the only one allowed to move pieces and you could only respond. Every time you cried, they advanced a pawn. Every time you raged, they made another move. But when you quietly get up from the board, not announcing, not flipping pieces, just leaving, the game ends. And what hurts them most isn't losing the match, it's realizing there's no one left to play against. This is why silence wounds them more than any argument ever could. An accusation, no matter how harsh, still gives them something to push back against, still gives them energy to feed on, but silence does not. It strips them of every possible reaction, leaving them gasping for control. In the narcissist's world where power is oxygen, your silence is suffocation. This also explains why, when ignored, they so often try to break the silence. They might send a casual message, "Hey, how have you been?" or "I just happened to think of you." They might post photos, resurface memories, or even invent a crisis just to drag you back into the loop. Every gesture has the same goal: to restart the cycle of manipulation. As long as you respond, the wheel turns again. But when you remain silent, the game is over. They have no stage left. They cannot cast you as too sensitive, weak, or wrong if you say nothing. And once you step outside the cycle, the entire illusion of power they believed in collapses with it. Silence, then, is not just an act of leaving. It's a refusal to participate. It's handing back their stage, still lit, but with no audience left. And for a narcissist, that emptiness is more terrifying than any defeat. For a super empath, this silence carries even greater force, because you were once their most loyal audience, the one who clapped the longest, believed the hardest, and stayed through the whole performance. When even you walk away in silence, they know the play has no meaning anymore. The brutal truth stands exposed. All the power they thought they had existed only in your reaction. When you go silent, they lose not just a lover, but an entire empire built on illusion. In the end, silence is how the manipulation cycle is broken. It doesn't need noise. It doesn't need dramatic confrontations. It only needs consistency. And when you hold that silence long enough, the cycle doesn't just stop, it vanishes. You reclaim your own rhythm, and they, the ones who lived by pulling strings, are left helpless in a world where you no longer dance to their tune. Part 4. The desperate performances to regain control. When the manipulation cycle is broken by silence, a narcissist does not easily accept defeat. They are not used to losing power, and they cannot stand the feeling of being forgotten. And that is when you begin to see them stage a series of performances, each one a desperate attempt to drag you back onto their stage. At first, they often pretend not to care. They'll act as if your silence hasn't affected them at all. You might see them post happy pictures, flaunt sudden successes, or even go public with a new relationship. This is a familiar tactic, creating the illusion that they're fine, that you're just a name crossed out. But behind that mask, the truth is very different. The harder they try to prove they don't need you, the more obvious it becomes that your silence is eating away at them day by day. When pretending not to care doesn't work, they shift to provocation. A short message like, "I miss the way you used to laugh," or a casual, "How have you been?" isn't genuine affection. It's a carefully designed trap. They want to see if you'll still react. If you respond even with a single detached sentence, the cycle instantly restarts. Because to them, any response means you're still under their control. If provocation fails, they often move into the victim role. This might be their most effective tactic against deeply compassionate people, like super empaths. They may say they're depressed, that nobody understands them but you, or that they've changed and are suffering without you. Lines like, "Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life," or "I don't know how to live anymore," might sound heartfelt, but in reality, it's just emotional manipulation. They're not in pain because of lost love, but because of lost power. When even playing the victim doesn't work, the narcissist often escalates to attack. They may smear your name, twist stories to tarnish your image in front of others. They might call you ungrateful, selfish, or even toxic. All of this serves a single purpose: to regain control of the narrative. If they can't control you, they'll try to control how others see you. But even if they succeed in spreading lies, what they really want remains the same: to break your silence. Sometimes, after trying everything, they return with promises. They may say they've gone to therapy, that they truly want to change, that this is the last chance to start fresh. Some will even cry, beg for another chance, and promise that things will be different this time. But as a super empath, you know these promises are usually just another loop in the cycle of manipulation. Without consistent actions and real change from within, they're just another performance to pull you back in. Another, more subtle strategy is what I call reverse silence. This time, they're the ones who disappear. No messages, no contact, no trace. The goal is to confuse you, to make you wonder, why are they silent? Have they really forgotten me? But if you stay clear-headed, you'll recognize it as just another version of the game. They hope you'll be the one to break the silence first. And if you do, the cycle spins again. Whether it's pretending not to care, provoking, playing the victim, attacking, promising, or using reverse silence, all of these performances have one thing in common. They are triggered by the loss of control. The narcissist cannot bear the idea that they no longer have the power to affect your emotions. And what hurts them isn't the silence itself, but what it means. You don't need them anymore. For a super empath, watching these performances can sting. You once loved deeply, forgave endlessly, believed you could save them, but the truth is, every reaction you give only prolongs the cycle. And that's why choosing silence isn't cruelty, it's self-protection. It's your way of saying, I've done everything I could, now I choose myself. When you hold your silence, those performances gradually lose their power, because no matter how skilled the actor, a play becomes meaningless without an audience. And for a narcissist, losing their most loyal audience, the super empath who once saw both their light and their darkness, is a pain they will never truly recover from. Part 5. Silence, the ultimate declaration of freedom. After all the performances, the cycles, and the desperate attempts of the narcissist to pull you back, what truly breaks them is not the fact that you left, but how you left, in silence. Because silence isn't just absence, it is a declaration. It is a full stop that doesn't need words. And for a narcissist, nothing is more painful than that declaration. Silence says you are no longer playing the game. You're no longer letting them define your worth, no longer letting them decide whether you're happy or sad today, no longer letting them steer your emotions through the script they wrote for you. Silence is handing back to them a brightly lit stage, but without an audience. They can keep performing, keep shouting, keep changing masks, but none of it matters when no one is watching. And in that emptiness, they're forced to face the one thing they fear most, themselves. For a super empath, that silence carries an even heavier weight, because you didn't just love someone, you sacrificed, you forgave countless times, believed in their promises, tried to heal a fractured soul. You saw the fragility in them that the world ignored, and you chose to stay longer than anyone else ever would. That's why when you finally choose silence, the narcissist knows they've lost the most precious thing of all. Not just a source of supply, but the one person who saw their light and still chose to love them. Silence, in this case, is not punishment. It's not revenge. It is freedom. It's the moment you realize you don't need them to feel valuable. You don't need to prove yourself, to argue, or to beg for validation. You are whole even without them. And that realization hurts them far more than anything you could ever say. The truth is, many people who leave toxic relationships still wrestle with the question, do they regret it? Do they miss me? Do they feel my absence? But the reality is, as long as you wait for those answers, you're still putting them at the center of your world. True victory isn't in watching them fall, it's in the moment you no longer need to know. You don't care what they feel, you only care about your own peace. Silence is the embodiment of that maturity. It says you've learned enough, hurt enough, sacrificed enough, and now you choose yourself. Not because you're cold, but because you understand that continuing to react is just chaining yourself to invisible shackles. Every text you don't reply to, every call you let ring out, every time you refuse to let your heart flinch at their old tricks, each one is a step back toward freedom. For the narcissist, that silence is unbearable. They will call you cruel, selfish, a traitor. They will twist the story to make you the villain. But those are just the dying echoes of a collapsing system of power. Deep down, they know they have nothing left to hold on to. When a super empath goes silent, the game ends. Silence also has another subtle power. It lets the truth reveal itself. When you don't react, you don't have to prove you're right. You don't have to expose their lies. Time and peace will do it for you. Others may believe their story for a while, but truth has a way of rising to the surface, and without you in the game, their fabrications slowly lose all meaning. In the end, silence is how you reclaim your real voice, the voice that doesn't need sound. It's the language of peace, strength, and self-respect. It's how you say, I gave everything, and now I return to myself. It's not just a choice, it's a declaration. And for the narcissist, that declaration is the final blow, because it strips away the thing they crave most: control over your emotions. This is why, of all the strategies you could ever use to free yourself from a toxic relationship, silence remains the strongest weapon. It requires no violence, no noise, no revenge, only consistency. And in that consistency, you discover something a narcissist will never touch: true freedom. When you truly understand the power of silence, you realize you no longer have to prove anything. Simply by living in alignment with your own values, you've already won. And if today's story spoke to you, don't forget to leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and share this video so that others can also discover the strength that comes from peace. I'll see you again on the next journey.